Oh, hey there. Didn't see you there. I'm gonna guess you clicked on this to learn about the Battle of Monte Cassino. I am your instructor, Daniel Portugal. I'm a part of set 3. This is my tactical video, the Battle of Monte Cassino. Boom! Oh, well, hello there. I'm gonna guess you guys know nothing about the Battle of Monte Cassino. Well, I'm your instructor. I'm gonna inform you about the Battle of Monte Cassino. So the Battle of Monte Cassino was fought during World War II, obviously, and it was a part of the Allies' campaign to break through the Gustav line. It was a series of fortifications by the Germans to defend Italy. The border like geopolitical context of the battle was the ongoing conflict between the Allies and the Axis power. With the Allies seeking to gain a foothold in Italy and push the Axis powers out of Europe. Additionally, the battle was also fought in the context of a larger Allied strategy, which was to invade Nazis that were occupied in Europe, which involved multiple fronts, including the D-Day landings in Normandy, and also the invasion of Sicily. The outcomes of the Battle of Monte Cassino played a significant role in shaping the course of war in Europe and ultimately led to the defeat of the Axis power. Well, hello there. As I gave you guys the slightest, the taste, the sliver of the Battle of Monte Cassino, I wanted to jump in now to the series of the 4 major battles that were fought by the Allied and Axis during World War II in the early 1944. So the battle took place obviously around the town of Cassino in Italy and was part of the larger Allied campaign to break through the Gustav line, which was a series of fortifications built by the Germans to defend Italy. Just picture this. You're on the battlefield, you're scared, you're wishing mommy would pick up the phone, but mommy's not gonna pick up the phone. Now imagine it, just imagine it. But actually, all joking aside, we should actually really be thoughtful of what these men have gone through, and because none of us would really think about their position or what they were in, or even dream to be in their position. We also really have to be thoughtful of the humanity of war as well. On January 17, 1944, when the Allied forces attempted to break through the Germans' lines around the Monte Cassino. However, they were very unsuccessful due to the difficult terrain, strong German defense, which the strong German defense had artillery, machine guns, minefield, and the Allies suffered heavy losses, and the Germans held their position. So now we're on the second battle, which began in February 15th of 1944. So not really much of a time difference. So one started in January 17th, and now we're on to February 15th of 1944. So same year. So it's literally like only a month difference, which is kind of crazy. But the second battle on February 15th of 1944, it all started with an aerial bombardment of the Monte Cassino monastery, which was believed to be the German stronghold. But however, the Germans had actually evacuated the monastery and actually set up defense in the surrounding hills, which proved difficult for the Allied forces to overcome. And the Allies were once again unsuccessful, and the Germans maintained control of the area once again. Okay, now we're on to the third battle, which was actually began in March 15, 1944. Kind of weird that this one's now another, like basically a month later. So 3 months of basically war and battling. So the third battle basically began on March 15th, 1944. It started with a massive Allied assault on the town of the Cassino. The fighting was actually very intense. There was both sides that suffered really heavy casualty, and the town was eventually pretty much destroyed. But however, the Germans were able to hold the positions and actually prevent the Allies from breaking through the Gustav line once again. Okay, so now we're finally on to the fourth and basically final war. This one actually began on May 11th. So now this is 2 months later than the previous one that we just talked about. So finally not a 1 month difference, finally 2 months difference. So the final war began on May 11th, 1944. It was a successful Allied assault on the Gustav line. The Germans actually eventually forced to retreat, and Allied forces were actually able to break through to Rome. This was a significant victory for the Allies, as it allowed them to gain a foothold in Italy and ultimately defeat the Axis power. So the Battle of the Monte Cassino was obviously a costly and difficult battle for both sides. There was an estimated around 55,000 casualties on the Allied side and then 20,000 on the Axis side. The destruction of Monte Cassino's monastery was pretty much obviously destroyed, obviously because there's 4 battles. but within a reasonable amount of time, it was later rebuilt, but it also remains a controversial aspect of the battle as well. So basically now in conclusion of like all the battles, the Battle of Monte Cassino was actually a crucial event in World War II, as it obviously played a significant role in the Allies' victory over the Axis power. As you can see, the Allies finally kept fighting, they fought, and finally in the fourth battle they won. So, they never gave up. That's a way to keep that mindset. And also it was a difficult, but it was also a costly battle as well. But the Allies obviously were able to force and eventually able to break through the Gustav line and actually gain a foothold in Italy. So good morning, good afternoon, or even good evening, whenever you're just watching this video and taking your time. We finished section 1, which was obviously about the war and then the 4 battles as well. Now section 2, I really just want to talk about the key commanders that were involved with the Battle of Monte Cassino, and obviously some of like the combat units that was involved with the Battle of Monte Cassino during World War II. Let's hop right into this. Well, hello there. Welcome back to section 2. So we're going to start off basically by talking about some of our key commanders that were involved with the Battle of Monte Cassino. So first up, we have General Harold Alexander. He was actually part of the Allied. General Alexander was actually the supreme Allied commander in the Mediterranean theater. And he was part of the operation and oversaw the overall strategy and the coordination of the Allied forces in Italy, which was including the Battle of Monte Cassino. Okay, so now on to the second key commander. So the second key commander was General Mark W. Clark. He was a part of the Allied. General Clark was the commander of the U.S. Fifth Army, which was responsible for ground operations that were going on in Italy. This including, obviously, the Battle of the Monte Cassino. He also led the Allied forces in their attempt to actually break through the Gustav lines. So the third and then the final commander that I have, please do not roast me down in the comments down below if I blow up this name. It's kind of difficult to say, but I'm going to try. It's General Heinrich von Wittinghoff. He was part of the Axis. General von Wittinghoff was actually the commander of the Germans' 10th Army, which defended the Gustav line in the Monte Cassino area. He led the Axis forces in their efforts to repel, obviously, against the Allies' attacks. So now that we're done with some of the key commanders that happened in the Battle of Monte Cassino, I want to now talk about the combat units that were involved. So starting off, we have the U.S. Fifth Army, which was the Allies. The U.S. Fifth Army was under the command of General Clark, who I said was a key commander. This was the main Allied force that involved in the Battle of Monte Cassino. It consisted of the Americans, the British, and other Allied troops. And it was also responsible for the ground operations and assault on the German defense. Second up, we have Polish Second Corps. The Polish Second Corps was commanded by General Władysław W. Władysław. I don't know if I really pronounced that right, but it's W. Władysław Anders. It was part of the U.S. Fifth Army and played a crucial role in the Battle of Monte Cassino. The Polish troops were tasked with capturing the Monte Cassino's monastery, and it was basically a strategic German stronghold as well. The Germans' 10th Army, which is part of the Axis, the German 10th Army under the command of General von Wittinghoff was actually responsible for defending the Gustav line, as I previously talked about, and also the Monte Cassino area as well. It consisted of Germans, Italians, and other Axis troops as well, and it had a really strong defensive position, which in the strong position they had artillery, machine guns, and also minefields, which I previously talked about in some of the battles that happened. And then we have a New Zealand Corps, which is part of the Allies. The New Zealand Corps was commanded by General Bernard Freyberg, who was part of the U.S. Fifth Army and played a significant role in the Battle of the Monte Cassino. The New Zealand troops were also involved in the assault of the German defense and contributed to overall Allied efforts to break through the Gustav line. So basically, kind of like in conclusion of the battles of Monte Cassino, the involved key commanders such as General Alexander, General Clark, and then also General von Wittinghoff, and combat units including the U.S. Fifth Army, the Polish II Corps, and Germany's 10th Army, and the New Zealand Corps These forces played a crucial role in the battle, which was obviously a major engagement in the Allied campaign to break through the Gestapo line and also gain a foothold in Italy, which I previously also talked about. So now that we've wrapped up with talking about the key commanders, key units, the 4 battles that were fought, I want to now talk about the results and the consequences of the Battle of Monte Cassino. So the Battle of Monte Cassino was obviously a significant campaign during World War II, and as a result and consequences that had far-reaching impact on the outcome of the war in Italy and beyond. I have now listed and made a list of some of the key results and consequences of the campaign that I am going to talk about. So first up that I wanted to talk about was the strategic stalemate. So the Battle of Monte Cassino resulted in a strategic stalemate with Allied forces unable to break through the heavily fortified German defense and obviously capture the strategical importance of the Monte Cassino's monastery and obviously the surrounding hills as well. But despite having several attempts, the Allies were unable to dislodge the Germans from their defensive positions, which obviously resulted in having a lot more heavily casualties on not just one side but both sides as well. Now, second up that I wanted to really talk about was the delayed Allied offensive. So the prolonged Battle of Monte Cassino delayed the overall progress of the Allied offensive in Italy. The battle lasted from obviously January to May 1944, resulting in a diversion of resources and also manpower as well from other fronts, and also slowing down the Allied advance towards Rome as well. This delay had implications on the overall timeline of the Italian campaign and impacted the coordination of the Allied forces in the Mediterranean theater. So third up, which I also think is super important, is the destruction of Monte Cassino's monastery that I want to talk about. So the historic Monte Cassino monastery was founded in the 6th century. It was heavily damaged, obviously, during the battles because there was 4 battles. The Allies believed that the Germans were using the monastery as a defensive position, and consequently, it was bombed and destroyed by the Allies' air raids in February 1944. The destruction of the monastery resulted in significant culture and historical loss and raised controversy and criticism after the war. Fourth up that we have to talk about is the Polish sacrifice. So the Battle of Monte Cassino is often remembered from the significant, obviously, sacrifices that happened in the war. It was made by the Polish Second Corps, who played a crucial role also in the battle. The Polish forces suffered heavy casualties, with over 4,000 soldiers killed or wounded during the campaign, which is crazy. Despite the high cost, the Polish Second Corps demonstrated valor and determination in their efforts to capture the Monte Cassino, and their contribution to the campaign is widely recognized, and obviously it is also honored as well. So fifth up, we have the recognition of the Allied forces. The stalemate at Monte Cassino was prompted that the Allied forces to reassess their strategy and kind of their tactics. General Harold Alexander, which we previously talked about as a key commander, he was obviously the supreme Allied commander in Italy, like we've talked about. He actually replaced General Mark W. Clark with General Oliver Leith as the commander of the British 8th Army. With this change in leadership actually resulted in recognition of the Allied forces and a shift in tactics, including increased aerial and artillery bombardment, which was actually to weaken the Germans' defense. So it's actually a really good call by General Harold Alexander to really replace General Mark W. with General Oliver Leith as the commander, because that really took down the Germans' defense. Okay, so final up, we have the sixth one on my list, but it's the final one, is the German withdrawal. So following the destruction of the Monte Cassino's monastery, it increased pressure from the Allied forces. The Germans eventually withdrew from the position in May 1944, allowing the Allies to break through and obviously advance towards Rome. The Battle of Monte Cassino marked a significant turning point in the Italians' campaign, as it paved kind of the way for the eventful liberation of Rome by allies in June of 1944. So basically, in conclusion of this segment, Battle of Monte Cassino resulted in a strategic stalemate, delayed the Allied offensive, led to destruction of the historic Monte Cassino's monastery. It also highlighted the sacrifice of the Polish II Corps, prompted recognition of the Allied forces, but it ultimately resulted in the Germans' withdrawal from the defensive positions as well. But despite the challenges and the cost, the Battle of Monte Cassino played a significant role in the Allied campaign in Italy and had far-reaching consequences on the outcome of World War II. Well, sadly, I hate to say this, but this will be the final segment of my video, and this is basically just an overall and brief summary of what we talked about the Battle of Monte Cassino. So let's hop right into this. Okay, so this is overall view and basically the summary of the Battle of Monte Cassino. So the Battle of Monte Cassino was a major campaign, obviously during World War II, that took place from January to May in 1944 in Italy. It was a series of 4 battles fought between the Allied forces that were led by the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, New Zealand, India, and Poland against the German forces who were holding strong defensive positions in the Monte Cassino region. So for the first context is the Italian campaign. So the Battle of Monte Cassino was a part of the larger Italian campaign, which was aimed to actually push the Germans out of Italy and open up a second front in Europe. So the Allies had landed in Italy in September of 1943 and faced stiff resistance from the German forces, who had forfeited defensive positions along the Gustav line in central Italy, with Monte Cassino being a key stronghold. And then for the second context we have is the Allied attempts to capture Monte Cassino. So the Allies had made several attempts to capture the Monte Cassino and break through the Germans' defense. The first battle was obviously in January of 1944, which was solved by the Allies trying to breach the Gustav line, but they were unable to break through the heavily fortified defenses, resulting in heavy casualties. In February, the historic Monte Cassino's monastery was actually bombed and destroyed by Allies from an air raid, as it was believed that the Germans were using it as a defensive position. However, the Germans actually remained firmly entrenched. And then third, for context, we have the Polish sacrifice, which we talked about. So the Polish Second Corps, under the command of General W. Ladislaw Anders, I don't know if I'm really pronouncing that name right, I hope I am, but it played a crucial role in the Battle of Monte Cassino. The Polish forces were actually launched a determined assault on Monte Cassino in May of 1944. They're facing fierce resistance from the Germans, despite suffering heavy casualties, including over 4,000 soldiers that were actually killed or even actually wounded. The Poles ultimately succeeded in capturing the Monte Cassino, and their bravery and sacrifices are obviously recognized and honored. So my fourth and final context that I have is the consequence and the impact. So the Battle of Monte Cassino had a significant consequences and impact on the overall outcome of World War II. While the Allies eventually succeeded in breaking through the Gustav line and advancing towards Rome, the prolonged battle resulted in diversions of resources and delayed the overall progress of the Italian campaign. Additionally, also the destruction of Monte Cassino's monastery raised ethical and moral questions, leaving a controversial legacy in the history of the war. Despite the challenges faced and the controversy surrounding the battle, the eventful capture of the Monte Cassino and the subsequent withdrawal of the German forces marked important steps towards the liberation of Italy from the Axis occupations and the eventful Allied victory in Europe. So basically, in conclusion, the Monte Cassino was a significant and complex military campaign during World War II. It was characterized by a strategic stalemate, a German withdrawal, and the Allied advance, as well as the controversial destruction of the historic Monte Cassino's monastery. The battle had far-reaching consequences and impact on the Italian campaign and the overall progress of the war. It remains a noteworthy chapter in the history of World War II, and this is my video, and thank you for watching.